What are your night shift horror stories? Used to work night shift at a 24-hour Walmart. Customers are nuts enough in the daytime, but they become weird after midnight. Once had an elderly gentleman come in wearing only a jean jacket and fishnet stockings. He came up to my register, leaned in and asked if we carried anything to get rid of lice. Those plastic barriers all stores have now to protect cashiers, they need to keep those even after the pandemic ends. I've lost count the amount of times customers got into my personal space to ask about products for fleas, lice, rashes, etc. Good to hear that the average Walmart goer is a gremlin. Those are the things that go crazy after midnight, right? Or is it don't feed them after midnight? Admittedly, I wouldn't feed a Walmart goer after midnight either. Story 2. I too work at Walmart. We have people slit their wrists in the bathroom, OD in the bathroom, bang on the floor of the bathroom. One of the managers was attacked by a shoplifter with a hatchet and another got maced in his face. His beard saved him from most of it. Lovely bunch. The scariest thing I've heard was one Christmas day when the store was closed, the alarm went off. A manager lived down the street, so he had to be the one to go check it out. He came in, shut off the alarm, and then checked for any signs that someone had broken in. Nothing. He hears a child's laugh. Now, he was alone in the store. No one else was with him. He looks for the kid, but can't find anything. Hears the laugh a few more times and then goes to check the cameras. Nothing. He locked up and refused to go back into the store alone. The only creepy thing I've personally experienced was being on a register away from most everyone else. I would constantly feel like someone was behind me. It would creep me out in the middle of the night. Years later, I hear someone talking about things falling off the shelves for no reason in a particular spot. We had a remodel, and the spot was where that register had been. I avoid that area at night now. Story 3. Was an orderly in a hospital. 2 of us were sitting in the basement office adjacent to the morgue. A guy passed our office, looking at us a little shifty-like. Came back again and asked if we had access to the morgue. We said yes, thinking he was doing a pickup for a funeral home. But that seemed strange, given it was around 12 to 12:30 a.m. Nope. He wanted to pay us to let him in and leave him alone with the bodies for an hour. We escorted him up to security. Apparently he had tried it in the past, as security knew him. Well, if there's one thing you can't fault him for, it's that he was upfront about it. Everything else, though, Story 4. Worked a parking garage at the airport. Cleaning the top deck and noticed about 100 ravens all over a truck with a tarp over the bed. Took my flashlight expecting something awful. Noticed as I got closer the smell and the ravens taking turns going into a hole they had torn open and popping out covered in gunk. Some guy left a broke-down beater with a couple of animal carcasses in the back to rot. No heads. Checked the logs and the damn truck had been there since November and it was April. So everything was just thawing and breaking down. Story 5. Worked as an evening manager at a major Hilton property. Got a complaint from a bunch of guests about the noise coming from one of the rooms. Turns out a drunken man was beating the crap out of his wife and had the door barricaded so we couldn't get in. I called the cops and they had to get into the room using the balcony from the next room over. I am still traumatized by what I saw when they finally arrested him and got the wife out of the room. She was absolutely covered in blood. It was horrifying. Story 6. I was walking through the simulation lab for nursing students at the hospital I work at on very little sleep. All the lights were off and it was my first time working night shift. Turned a corner and saw what I thought was a person standing behind a lamp that was on. Turns out it was just a mannequin holding the pull cord. Really freaked me out and I was awake after that. Story 7. It was 3 a.m., popular Canadian coffee shop. There's one old baker in the back that rarely interacts with me past a dirty joke or a dirtier ditty from his Navy days. Other than that, I'm alone. Not another soul around the area, and I expect it to remain so for at least an hour yet. I'm boxing up the day-olds for the homeless shelter when I swear I see something out of the corner of my eye. It's behind me. I turn, then look down. There's a small child standing there. A native little toddler with a faux hawk staring at me intensely. I'm struck dumb with how absurd the situation is. How did he get behind the counter? I didn't hear the door open or see him come through the counter. I scan the storefront. No one. I yell for the baker in case he has a friend or something visiting that lost their kid. He comes over and, like me, does a double take at the kid and is baffled. Kid starts muttering incoherently. I get him a glass of water and a donut hole, and the baker runs out of the store to do a perimeter of the block. I call the non-emergency line and explain I have a little kid with no parents. I can't get any information out of the boy, just mumbles and I can't make it out. Police arrive, Baker comes back saying he can't find anyone else in the streets. The guy from the 24/7 corner store said he'll keep an eye out. Police try to speak to the kid and also get nothing but mutterings and half-hearted gestures. They take him away. I see them again for their morning coffee, and they told me the little guy walked several kilometers from the nearest reservation in the dead of night to my store. He had gotten into his parents' medicine cabinet and just walked out of the house. I was floored. It must have taken that poor baby hours to get to me. Seeing him behind me like that in the dead of night still shakes me. Spooked me more than the guy that threw a pot of coffee at me, or the woman that tried to stab me with a plastic spoon because I refused to give her a metal one. And even the dude that waited around for 4 hours hoping to catch me alone so he could teach me a lesson since I didn't have the flavor of bagel he wanted. Several kilometers? And when they say he got into his parents' medicine cabinet, I'm assuming that means he took something. That must have been very confusing and frightening for the kid. I hope he's alright. Impressive little trek though. Story 8. I worked in an open quarry mine down in Texas. We had this storm where it rained like nothing else for hours and hours. Being night shift, 6:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. supervisor, I was in charge of 8 Cat 745 haul trucks, 2 Cat 390 excavators, 6 Cat 980 loaders, 2 D8 dozers, and 1 D9 dozer. It was about 2 a.m. when I had 3 haul trucks get stuck in the bottom of the mine, just spinning their tires endlessly. It was horrible. Since we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars of production per shift, I had to get permission to shut down the mine from the superintendent, and relay that to the supervisors up in the plant that washes/dries the minerals. They wouldn't shut down because I said so. I called him at minimum 13 times within an hour to get him to shut the mine down. Since it was 2 a.m., he never answered, which never happened as he always had his phone on. 3 of us were soaking wet and covered from head to toe in mud, to the point where you couldn't even tell we were wearing neon green high-vis safety gear. We got the trucks pulled out of the mine after roughly 3 hours using a combo of dozers and loaders and excavators to essentially build a new road from drier materials. The superintendent got in at 6 a.m. for the 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. shift. Took one look at the mine and shut it down for the day. Turns out his phone charger came unplugged and his phone had died in the middle of the night. Never knew I called. Story 9. I've lived the IT version of this last story multiple times, where on-calls or management won't answer on time-sensitive issues. The upside is I never get covered in mud in the rain. One time, a C-level executive who always relied on his assistant to manage his computer for him, aka he didn't know his own password, jumped on a plane to Europe for a conference, where he was going to give a presentation on behalf of the company, without his assistant. My company is a contractor, so I certainly can't authorize giving someone access to that PC, and I have no means to verify his identity in the first place. I basically called every contact at the client's local IT for 45 minutes until someone answered. We cooked up a verification process out of nothing to give the guy access to the local admin account, so he could at least log in, then remote in and get him VPN'd and regain access. They apparently renewed their contract with us because of that night, and I got a pretty decent bonus. Different night, different client. A brass mill that runs 24/7 and loses $150K if they're down for an hour. Wi-Fi goes down, but only to a quarter of the plant. No idea why, but they have a metric ton of floor terminals that run the machines that require the Wi-Fi to function. So the whole place is at a standstill, bottlenecked by those machines that are down until they're back up. Their network team isn't answering. Their server team isn't answering. Their management isn't answering, down well over an hour. I eventually get a hold of an on-site maintenance guy who sometimes assists with basic IT tasks that we can't initiate remotely, because he's the only one answering the phones. Turns out that section of the mill was serviced by a direct off-the-shelf Netgear router. I have no idea how that's possible, but he was aware of it because he has to go reboot it sometimes. I ask him to go do that and call me back. He calls back 20 minutes later saying everything is fine. The router, on top of being retail-grade trash, was just stuck in a random supply closet, which had a leak. Water was dripping directly onto the router. He took it down, dried it off, moved it somewhere else, and eventually it came back up. I wrote a very strongly worded email that morning that read, "You idiots just lost over $200,000 because your network team buys hardware at Walmart." I can only imagine how frustrating it would be when you're trying to do your job and call someone to help, but no one is picking up. I would probably just lose my mind. I don't know how I would take it. It's either that or I'd be like, oh, well, nothing I can do. It's their loss. Seriously though, you're running something that's that important to have internet for, and you get a Walmart router? Come on. Just asking for problems. Story 10. Many years ago, I worked at a regional radio station in the middle of frickin' nowhere, Australia. I was the overnight operator, kept the overnight playlist running, set up for the morning, do all the manual checks for the next day, and jump on the desk if anything funky happens. I spent a lot of time sitting in what was essentially a tin shed in the middle of a paddock, with my dog, shoes off, listening to 50s and 60s music and doing crossword puzzles. Except one night when the roo shooters came through. They spooked the kangaroos in the paddock, and one of them jumped head first through our office window. So there's me barefoot and half asleep when this 6-foot-tall kangaroo smashes through the glass window. Blood and glass everywhere. My dog starts chasing the kangaroo, I'm chasing my dog, and the kangaroo bounds around the office, knocking crap off desks in the dark, bleeding everywhere. I ran and opened the studio bay doors and my dog chased it outside, where I'm assuming the poor thing, the kangaroo, was shot. Then I had to call my boss. So I'm gonna let my North American ignorance show for a bit and be like, what's a roo shooter? Why are they shooting the roos? Is it to quell the population? Is it for food somehow? What is it? If you know, let me know in the comments. Story 11. I was once staying late doing some scenic painting in a college campus theater. It was late, pitch black outside, and very quiet in the building. A few of us were up on the stage not really talking, just taking care of business. When I suddenly saw out of the corner of my eye, something go very quickly by the open door to the lobby. What the hell? Then it went by again and I actually saw what it was. A guy with long hair wearing pajamas and no socks or shoes. He was tiptoeing in a very exaggerated way, pulling his knees up very high and grinning. What the hell? It sounds kind of funny, but it was creepy as hell. We all made eye contact and one of the other painters was about to go shut the door when the dude walked straight in. He stood there staring at us for a full minute. You could have heard a pin drop. He threw his arms out to the sides dramatically and said, "I am your savior, Jesus Christ." No one responded and he eventually walked out. I guess he was hoping to get more of a reaction. The door was promptly shut and locked behind him and security was called. They were not impressed. Turns out that he was a patient at some sort of group home nearby and had done this multiple times. I still get creeped out to this day if I'm working in a theater at night though. Story 12. I worked in a residential treatment center for teen girls. One girl with some severe trauma, assault, and abuse came sleepwalking into the room screaming to please untie her while clawing at her wrists. She was begging me to help her because she said that he was torturing her. I sat her down and pulled her bracelets and watch off. Then she went completely limp and then got up and went back to bed. It freaked me out seeing the raw emotion of her trauma, since she was always smiling and relatively calm during the day. Another time I was doing my nightly checks and a guy suddenly walked out from behind the door coming at me. I screamed and threw my flashlight at him. It was a smiley face balloon. That first one is a lot more just like unsettling horror. And yeah, that would stick with me for a long time. OP, the work you did, super valuable. Someone's got to do it and not everyone can take it because I know I can't. Thank you for helping all those people. You're kind of a hero. You know what? Scratch the kind of. You're a hero, OP. Thank you. That goes for anyone else with that kind of job who's listening, or who wants to go into that kind of job. You're all incredible people. Story 13. Worked night shift at a large grocery store. One that wasn't open overnight, but had a skeleton crew to work the loads and do prep and clean. I worked near the entrance. Large glass doors, but visually blocked off from my vantage point. At around 3 a.m., I hear knocking on the doors. This isn't completely uncalled for. Usually it's someone coming in for an early shift, but didn't have a key card. Sometimes it's someone's food delivery, or sometimes a customer who thinks we're open despite clearly being closed. I approach the door and it's a man I don't recognize wet from the rain. He looks normal enough, but something about him unnerved me. He had that vibe to him, you know the one, where it seems like maybe they're on their way to becoming a full-blown druggie, but for now they still manage to give the appearance of functionality. He was holding himself together just enough to appear normal, but the edges were definitely shaky. Anyway, without unlocking the door, I announced that the store was closed. He told me that he just needed my help. His car had broken down in the parking lot and he needed a boost. I didn't drive, so I told him I couldn't help. I should have walked away then and there, but he was out in the rain and I did legitimately feel bad. So I told him I would see if any one of our few crew did drive. I did find someone who was willing to help, and got the night crew manager involved as well. We went out. Turns out he was parked a bit off from the entrance in a fairly secluded spot, and he had a lady with him. There was a similar vibe with her. Almost, but not exactly normal. It didn't click right away, but I figured they had been hooking up in the car in the parking lot, maybe left the radio or lights on and drained the battery. To me, that explained the weird unnerving feeling. They either felt ashamed or guilty and it was showing through. Anyway, my coworker goes over to help give them a boost. The manager and I stay out there with him, nearby, watching. The two lovebirds kept peeking over at us a bit uncomfortably. After a few moments, the coworker returns from the car and hurries us back inside. We don't see them drive off, which seems odd. We get inside, lock up again, and then the coworker thanks us for staying out there with him. He also caught on to the unnerving air about them, and it made him worried. What worried him even more, though, was when it also turned out that there was nothing wrong with their car. Story 14. Used to work night shift at a middle school. Every night while cleaning out the boys' locker room, I would hear at least one locker slam shut, sometimes more. This creeped me out when I started, but after a couple months, I got used to it. One night while cleaning one of the girls' locker rooms, I heard a girl scream. I walked out of the locker room, even looked outside the building. Didn't see anyone. Before that, I worked at the high school. I would hear doors randomly open and close. Nowadays, I work day shift at another school. About a year ago, I just got to the building to begin my shift. It was still dark out and I was turning on all the lights. When I walked by the main office, I heard what sounded like someone ransacking the place. Papers being tossed, and I heard what sounded like a table or file cabinet being dragged. I remember my first thought was, man, somebody must have lost something important. Then, it clicked. It was 6 in the morning and it was either Thanksgiving or Christmas break, meaning there was no school, and there shouldn't be anybody there. Took me a second to work up the courage to go in and check it out. When I did, nobody was there and nothing was out of place. Finally, last month I get a call from dispatch at 3 a.m. The fire alarm was going off and they needed someone to go turn it off. As soon as I walked in, I freak out. The alarm is blaring, but what scared me was the strobe light that flashes with the alarm. The building was pitch black except every other second when that strobe lit up the halls. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie where they're looking for the murderer. I was half expecting to see someone pop up out of nowhere when the halls lit up. I don't know if you all feel the same way, but that last depiction of the strobe in the hall, I know exactly what OP means. And oh boy, would I be scared. I would not want to enter that building. I wouldn't even want to look at it. For the first 2 stories though, I think OP's just hearing things. It's weird that all of these things have happened and there's been no tangible proof for any of it. Maybe OP works on low sleep or something and is hallucinating. Story 15. Not mine, but I used to work at a small hotel and the manager there told me a terrifying night shift story. It was about midnight when she got a call at the front desk from a man. He said that he's with his 8-year-old daughter who dances competitively and needed advice on what she should wear. She gave him some basic fashion advice. He asked my manager, "What about fishnet leggings? Do you think those are too sexy?" Then proceeds to talk in graphic detail about how he thinks his own daughter has been trying to seduce him for weeks, and how he's starting to enjoy seeing her dance in these cute outfits. Meanwhile, my manager is looking through a computer system trying to figure out who this man is so she can call the cops. However, the room he was reportedly in was empty. The man ends up hanging up the phone before she could figure out where he was truly calling from. A couple months later, at around 11 p.m., my manager answers the desk phone. A familiar voice asked her if she could help him pick out an outfit for his daughter's next recital. She asked him, "Let me guess, you want to know if she should wear fishnet leggings?" The man immediately hangs up the phone. I do love turning it around on a prank caller. At least I'm assuming it's a prank caller. I don't see any other reason for this. But yeah, just being like, yeah, let me guess, it's this? You've done this before, buddy. Get some new material. And then they just hang up out of shame like, dang, that didn't work. Story 16. Work in the winter for me is plowing and snow removal. It was late and I had been out for over 24 hours at this point. Pulled over into a small cul-de-sac with the nearest house being over 100 yards away, so I could let the truck stay on so I could stay warm. As I'm nodding off, there was a very loud bang, and it felt like someone then pulled on my driver's side door handle. Luckily, I always lock my truck doors. I immediately threw on every strobe/rear/headlight and started looking around, and I saw absolutely nothing. It scared the crap out of me. Needless to say, I never sleep anywhere other than lit parking lots now. Isn't this a thing where people are more prone to hallucinations when they're about to fall asleep? Or even people get like a loud bang in their head or something as they're falling asleep? Because I know there's also the like feeling of falling that's called a hypnagogic jerk, by the way. But I don't know what the other two are called, if they're even a thing, but I feel like they are. Fun fact about yours truly, I used to be able to make myself hallucinate when I was falling asleep when I was younger. Like, I could just think about a song and then I would have to dissociate a bit so I couldn't think about it too hard or else it would go away. But once I dissociated a bit, I could hear the music like clear as day. That was something I always thought was really cool. Story 17. Used to work nights at a Home Depot. There was one time where for a week or so, our store stayed open 24 hours. For the most part, this wasn't really a problem. Typically, nobody comes shopping for home improvement items at 2 in the morning, except that one couple who came in looking for marble countertops at 1:30 in the morning, and the woman was wearing a nice dress. I guess there was also that one young lady who came looking for a toilet paper roll holder a little while after midnight. I had just gotten off my first break, and she was wearing jorts and one of those white with black belt stereotypical karate outfits. She was oddly specific about which roll holder to get too, but the real story lies within the insulation. It was nearing 3 in the morning and me and another guy were stocking insulation, as well as fixing the bays and some such maintenance. A bunch of big R30s had fallen in their bay, and while I was sorting through them, a frickin' hand came out of the mess and grabbed my arm. I lost my mind enough for not only the guy I was working with to freak out, but also for my boss, who was across the store, to come check out the commotion. Turns out a homeless drunkard had come into the store at some point, and I can only assume before the night crew showed up, and had made a nest in the insulation where he fell asleep. The dude was in bad shape, too. Like, so far gone into whatever inebriation that we had to call the police to remove him. I was always a little more cautious around the insulation after that, for at least the time the store stayed open 24 hours. I feel like a hardware store like Home Depot would actually be one of the scarier places to work at night, especially if you worked anywhere near, I don't know, the saws? Like, there are things in there that a murderer could use in, like, a slasher flick, right? That is a feasible setting for a crazy axe murderer, because that's where they can get their axe. I don't know, maybe that's too stereotypical creepy, but I find it creepy nonetheless. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed and were thoroughly spooked by some of these stories. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.